There we are. Hello.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our incredibly echoey podcast.
I love how I hit like go live, and the first thing that happened was like a loud car horn outside, like clockwork.
All
Oh, life.
right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is the Infinite Awesome Cape and Cowl Book Club show. Nice work.
Good
We're here
job.
to talk about some comics new and old, make you love what we love. Maybe even pick up something cool to keep you company over the Thanksgiving break. I'm joined here by my colleague and main man, Cody Supreme, aka the Mutant Menace, and myself, Kevin McCormick, aka Kevbozilla.
Hello,
You
everyone.
anything you want to say to the people, Cody?
Just hello. And yeah, that covered all the bases there. We get together and talk about comics that we want to share with everybody. But how are you? How are you this evening, Kevin?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing really good. I am relying on our lovely viewers this evening to let us know if the audio quality or video quality is lagging or acting shitty at any point. So feel free to chime in if you guys are watching and let us know if you're hearing weird echoes. We are in the same room, so it's just kind of nature of the beast, but we can talk quietly. We can try to mute our mics when we're not talking. But we're here for you guys, so you let us know. Um, but beyond that, I'm really excited. Today's my Friday, so.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. Last night we did our picks of the week video, and there was like this obnoxious sound that sounded like a giant chewing right into a microphone, like ASMR from hell. So if you hear any
Yeah.
like abnormalities, please do let us know, and we'll try our best to fix that.
I'm getting a little weird audio choppiness on my end from you, Cody. I'm going to try getting off the network and see if that helps.
Okay, it's super entertaining. Yeah, we're just working out the kinks right now so that the actual show goes smoothly.
All right. I think maybe that fixed it. Oh, there goes the dog again.
Yeah, it's perfect.
We don't have a dog in the store. We just have very sensitive microphones.
Yeah, so sorry.
Okay.
Ah,
We're just gonna launch right into it. Dogs and honking cars be damned.
be damned.
I have a really slick stack of awesome books to show you guys, and I am going to jump right in. First book of the week. It's an oldie, but it's a goldie. Um, I'm sure y'all seen the Jim Carrey movie The Mask, which is based on this glorious Dark Horse comic by John Arcudi and Doug Mank. Um, so they basically took everything in this book, watered it down, made it a little more kid friendly, and then threw Jim Carrey's rubber face on top of the character, which made it an amazing movie. Great to rewatch all the time. I love that. But it does not do the comic book justice in any way, shape, or form. It is a bloody, violent comic full of murder and essentially instead of the mask sticking with Stanley Ipkiss like it does in the movie, the mask actually bounces around between a few characters, namely Stanley, his girlfriend, the police chief, and I think some mob bosses or something like that. There is a second volume. It's a really big kind of omnibus. There's two volumes to this, and they've actually rebooted the Mask series in the last year. I think it was called like I Mask Allegiance or something like that. But it's great. I mean, I'll give you guys an example. You remember that scene where Jim Carrey goes into the mechanics and the guys are trying to screw him over, and he leaves after I think beating him up with a tailpipe or something. Well, in this one, he straight up murders them and shoves a tailpipe right up their butt. Here's a nice little scene of some wholesale carnage and bloodshed that you guys can see. The lettering is top notch. It really fits the manic vibes of the book. It doesn't slow down at all. There's no lag in this book between when the mask goes from one person to the other. It's just nonstop action and madness. Um,
Those colors were great.
it's so good. A funny story about this: when I was a kid, my dad actually bought me the mask comic book on CD-ROM at Costco back when you could get those. And he bought it because obviously we'd seen the movie and he thought like, oh, that's fine. My kids can read that. It wasn't until I was like halfway through it on my Mac Performa where I was reading it that he looked over my shoulder and was like, "Don't tell your mom I let you read this." So if you're looking for some awesome, irreverent fun that kind of tickles your nostalgia a little bit because it's got that Mask feel that you grew up with, prepare to be shocked and awed and maybe dismayed a little bit at how just violent and crazy it is. I highly recommend it. We have volume 1 in stock. If you've already read volume 1, you're looking for volume 2, reach out. We could probably order that. But that's my first pick of the week. Mask Omnibus volume 1. Huzzah.
Yeah, that was one of the big like childhood breakers, is finding out that book is so graphic and intense, and you're just like, oh yeah, Jim Carrey, love him. And the music, or the movie rather, is not like it's like completely like G, but they really did soften it for that, and they had to. But
and I mean, it's super cool to see the way like the mask interacts differently with every person that puts it on. So with Stanley Ipkiss, you get the very classic like mask character from the movie. Although more violent. But then when like his girlfriend steals the mask or the police chief finds the mask, I mean, the police, they all have different ideas. The mask essentially brings out your innermost desires. And so like the police chief wants to be done with crime. So he turns into this crime murdering maniac. No one can really control the mask is really the moral of the story. So I'm sure there's some larger lesson about be careful what you wish for or something like that. But I never got that far. I just liked the madness. All right. And now over to my colleague, Cody. Look, I pointed the right way this time.
Yay, first try.
Okay.
Cool. Let's see. What do I want to talk about first? I'll talk about this one first, because funny story, I was supposed to talk about this last week. I legit like have been excited to read it, and I read it for last week's show and then failed to. So I'll start with this guy this week. This is called The Resistance. This is a book by J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, the television show. He's known for a bunch of comics too. He did a long old run on Spider-Man. And some other books that he wrote that I'll get into as I expand on this one. But The Resistance is by J. Michael Straczynski, and it was illustrated by Mike Deodato Jr. This is a book off of AWA Studios. I like to say AWA, but I don't know if that's a thing that anybody says. But it's a book off of AWA, which is a new comics publisher who is a kind of an interesting publisher that came on the scene. It's made up of like Marvel alums, like old Marvel editors. Axel, what's his name?
Axel,
Yeah. Alonzo.
Huh.
I always want to call him Axl Rose. It's just like it just follows Axel when I say it. But Axel Alonso and Bill Gemmas are two like Marvel editor dudes that have started their own thing. It's called AWA, and The Resistance is kind of their big blockbuster superhero story. And I wanted to read this one really bad because I'm actually a big fan of J. Michael Straczynski. I love his writing. I think he has a really theatric style, and he's a showrunner, so he knows how to write episodic content super well. And this book is quite a time to read this book. I just read it, and it's funny because the first thing that starts this book is a big pandemic. It's wiped out a huge chunk of the world's population, which I was like, all right, so this is like incredibly topical. And as it turns out, this is a like new pandemic. It's a sweeping virus that's knocking everybody out. And the people, a big fraction of the survivors of this big plague, essentially gain superpowers. So over time, people start showing like weird abilities, kind of your standard superhero fare. And what's interesting about this book too, besides just being like super topical, is it's J. Michael Straczynski doing what I think he does best, which is handling the broader repercussions of a grand world-shaking event. He gets into the politics of it. He gets into how governments are going to react to this kind of thing, and it really is super in-depth. I mean, he covered a lot of bases in this book about how the governments are going to handle it, and some of it's like very much real life. Like I think it's China in this book that stops all travel, much like Hawaii did. They didn't let anybody travel in there. but he even tackles things like how would the government react to the appearance of super beings? Well, they would try to like market them and they would try to like control them first. So there's a whole issue where we spend time with this guy he's going and getting his costume. He's talking to this woman who specializes in branding. She's like, okay, so what's your thing? Like, what are your power sets? And he's like, oh, I have super strength and invulnerability. She's like, okay, anything more like specific, anything like a wow factor? And he's like, no, that's it. But like, I like bullets don't pierce my skin. And she's like, okay. And like, it shows what she's writing and she's just writing the word generic. And it's just like really funny. And they handle like this guy tailors super suits. It's just like a really in-depth look at how the world would react to not only a pandemic, which hello, but also the repercussions of super beings, super powered creatures, that used to be normal, how we deal with that, the emergence of something so different. And it's full of little hints at what AWA might be publishing soon. It looks like there's some spin-offs that are branching out of the Resistance universe. So this is a cool launchpad if you're looking for a new superhero story that's kind of very, very modern, not to mention topical, but from a writer who really understands political intrigue and big, grand storytelling. And one of the things that AWA mentioned is that they like to focus more on narrative and story, and they don't get like they kind of throw a jab at like the big two publishers because they don't want characters to just sell books. They want like, stories that are more than just the IP, like the intellectual property. And that actually is no exception with this one. There's not really like main characters. There's characters you certainly follow, but this is more about the world and how people deal with this on a more grand scale. And we meet a bunch of characters and we get little slices of life in the aftermath of what happens. So that's another thing that separates it. It's not going to be like, this is Superman, this is your main character. It's more like, how the hell is the world going to react? So it's very interesting that way.
Is this part of an existing world that's been built? I know he did some stuff similar to that with Rising Stars back in the 90s when, superhero comics were a dime a dozen. He was actually, I think it was like the same stilo. He was just doing amazing stories with incredible characters, but not character-driven stories. And it might have been the reason that they didn't stick around, but I loved the Rising Stars series that he did. Have you ever checked that one out?
No, I haven't read Rising Stars. What I've read of Michael Straczynski that was kind of similar to this was Supreme Power that he did for Marvel Max. And that was basically using the Squadron Supreme, which are basically Marvel's Justice League analogs. They're like complete knockoffs of the Justice League. But Straczynski wrote the best incarnation, in my opinion, of the Squadron Supreme because it was raw and it was Marvel Max, so he could do whatever he wanted. And he could get like really like wild with it. And it's some of the actually like best superhero writing. And that's why I love him. I kind of follow him into these new things.
Yeah. I'll have to check that out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I like me some J. Michael. That's some good stuff.
He is really good. I like him a lot.
I mean, he has politics nailed, man. I mean, Babylon 5 was all space politics.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, his work is really theatrical. It feels like a really good show you'd see like on Netflix or something. The pacing, he's just so good with pacing, which is so important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of his stuff that he did in the 90s just got kind of lost in the wash. There was so much stuff coming out then that it was hard to really rise to the top. And I guess pun intended, Rising Stars for me rose to the top, but it did not stick around. I think it was on like CrossGen or one of those weird publishers that popped up around then.
Oh yeah.
But all right, Resistance. I want to check that one out. And we should mention too, for everyone watching, we have a lot of other AWA books, AWA books. They've been putting out a slew of new titles. So if you want to check it out on our Comic Hub app, you can filter by publisher, filter by AWA, see what's there. Might be some cool stuff that you might want to check out.
Yeah, and I always forget like a lot of people really like to see some art. So it's Deodato, so it's Deodato's like hyper realistic kind of facial expressions and his super like crazy like classic dynamic comic poses that all these superheroes are doing, and the coloring is super dark.
He used to do that in his old comics too, where he would play with the frames, where he would put like 5 panels on a page, but he would have the images totally blowing those panels out, like it couldn't even contain what was going on. It might be like 2 pictures in 5 panels, which was always kind of a cool choice, I thought.
Oh yeah, I'm actually a total sucker for Deodato's paneling, actually, for that reason, because he'll do things like he'll just split things into panels, even if it's like you said, it'll be one image
Yeah, so
but it
tight.
blows through them, and he just uses that classic comic paneling and kind of just really has fun with it, and that's something I really like about his work.
Yeah, yeah. Don't miss Resistance. It looks awesome. Get your copy before I scoop them up myself.
You know what's really funny about Deodato though is like I like Deodato, but this man cannot handle hands. His hands are huge. Have you ever noticed that?
No.
Oh my god! Well, because I'm talking modern Deodato. This
Yeah.
and Savage Avengers. If you look at Wolverine's hands in Savage Avengers, it's bigger than his head, and I don't know why Deodato just like gets really panicked or confused and just makes massive hands. It's really funny, but I like him. But I'm just saying it's something I noticed.
Maybe Deodato has really tiny hands, and he's just like, look at my tiny hands. I want all
Maybe,
my characters to have big hands.
or they're huge, and he thinks everybody's hands are Deodato hands, but they're not. Also, thank you, Aton, for pointing that out. I legit didn't know that I did that. That's good to know, I guess. What is it with like these like? Why do I pronounce artist names with hard T's and nothing else? I don't get it.
I like it.
Mike Rowe, I know I am. Next question. I'm just kidding. The art is nice.
All right, I've got another. No, I'm going to save this one. I'm going to talk about a different one. Okay, I'm going to talk about this one because the final hardcover deluxe edition came out this week. So I feel like it should get a little bit of a spotlight. It's a book by the illustrious Brian K. Vaughan called Paper Girls. It's been coming out for a while. I think it started kind of around the time Saga started. It's epic. It's essentially Stranger Things, but with all girls and time travel. And
show off that cover, bro.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to show you a series of the covers because they made an amazingly awesome choice when they were putting these covers together. You can see how the cover sort of wraps around to that side. And then when you get to volume 2, it completes. Oops, that's the wrong way. It completes the, sorry, I have to look at it when I'm doing this. There we go. The covers are one continuous front to back image that just continues to go from volume. Damn, I'm really bad at this. So this is actually one of the cases where I love hardcovers. I love omnis and deluxe editions. They're like my jam. But this is one of the few cases where I think the paperbacks might almost be as cool. I don't want to say cooler because the hardcovers are all shiny and beautiful. But the paperbacks, man, it's not a bad one to have on your shelves. So let me show you guys a little bit of the art through this. It's I would almost call this an all ages comic. There's a couple of mature themes like suicide, and the girls are like swearing, kind of like young kids do when they're expressing their freedom when they're away from their parents, but nothing that anyone would blink at nowadays. So let me show you some of the art. It's by Cliff Chang, who is amazing. He did one of my favorite Wonder Woman runs ever. This is a real early spread that we get in the book. This starts out with a young girl who just moved to this neighborhood that she's living in, and she's joined the Paper Girls. And it just so turns out that her first night on the job is Halloween. So she goes out with some of her friends, or not friends, but these girls that she's just met. And it's cool. She kind of has to figure out the group dynamic real quick. There's one girl who smokes cigarettes and doesn't give a shit about anything. There's another girl who's kind of nice. And then a girl who like cruises around carrying a field hockey stick with her, who's kind of like the tomboy of the group. They start to encounter, it kind of strays from the Stranger Things sort of vibe in that the time travel element, but it's amazing the way they deal with it because they're dealing with essentially two groups of time travelers, the old timers and the youngins. And it's essentially this like battle between the ages, like literally the young kids who have harnessed time travel and are changing things versus the old people who are trying to stop the youngins from going back and changing stuff. It results in some really, really wild time travel from like caveman times to the far-flung future. But it's like it's got such an awesome heart to it. I think that if you want something rad to read that's complete, you don't mind 6 volumes worth of reading. I don't. I love books that have a nice sort of like 6 to 10 volumes. I would recommend checking it out. You can go with either the paperbacks or, like I said, the hardcovers comprise 2 volumes each. There's 3 of those, and they're only $35. It's not really that major a price difference between that and the paperbacks. I don't know. You got anything you want to contribute to the old Paper Girl discussion, Cody? I know you haven't read it.
Well, I was just going to say that there's a certain seal of quality that comes with a Brian K. Vaughan book. Yeah. You know that you're going to get characterization out the wazoo, and so that like his name is more often than not very worth admission. So
yeah. Oh, let me show you. I'll show you guys a couple of the other covers. This kind of gives you an idea. It shows like, so this is the first cover with the girls doing their paper delivery thing. Cover 2, you get to see those characters a little older. One of them's in a spacesuit, or what looks like a spacesuit. And then boom, then you've got a little bit of the prehistoric caveman stuff, but then there's also this like sci-fi lady with the mohawk. It's a very, very diverse cast of characters, but hilariously, it's like almost all the same characters, just like different ages and different versions of themselves. It can get, I feel like time travel books can get really like lost in themselves and get kind of hard to understand. I didn't feel that way about this book at all. When I got to the end, all the time travel stuff seemed wrapped up real nice, and it didn't like there wasn't some crazy time travel revelation that blew my mind in the way they deal with it. But it's nice that they dealt with it in a way that it wasn't problematic and took me out of the book at all. This is book 5. Now we're bringing guns and crazy futuristic stilo to the table, and then finally you get some older seasoned versions of them girls you saw on volume 1. So join the Paper Girls on their journey through time and space. It's a fun one, I promise.
Do you know how long I have seen those trades, how long I've worked here and shelved those trades, and I have never noticed that they connect that way?
Oh yeah, when volume 3 or 4 came out, Aton used to let me set up displays kind of willy-nilly, and I did one that was like all of the covers next to each other, and it was like mind-blowing. It was so wide I couldn't even take a picture of it, so I couldn't like share it with people, but it is so well done, and it certainly gives you the sense that this entire story, this entire book full of ideas has been thought to completion before they went in and started printing. Like, I didn't feel at all like he was, I mean, it's Brian K. Vaughan. He's never going to feel like he's just winging it at the end of the book, no. But everything seemed very, very well thought out. Like I said, loose threads are tied up or snipped off, and it's a hell of an experience. I've reread the first 4 volumes like 10 times, and then I finally read the last 2 sometime last year, and I was just shocked that it took me that long to get through the rest of it. I think it's also kind of that sense of where like you have a really good series that you don't want to finish, so that final volume or those final couple issues just sit there for like a year until you get around to it.
Yeah, very that. That's one thing I'll never forget about the way I read Saga. I read Saga when it was already on hiatus. So like everyone was already like agonizing, and people used to agonize weekly, and it took me a long time to finally sit and read Saga. So when I did, I got to just go, and I have the 3 hardcovers. I read like 1.5 of them in one night, and I was like, oh man, yeah, this would have killed me if I was waiting weekly. Like, but like I was just like in hog heaven, just turning every single issue. Like, yep, another one. Yeah, so
100%. Yeah,
addictive BKV books.
He's a good one, that's for sure.
He really is. I read recently, I would talk about it, but we don't stock it, and it might be out of print, but I read The Hood. Have you ever read that under Marvel?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
He like co-created The Hood with the artist. I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
that's like his character. Yeah,
I have to track that down. I wonder if we have any sitting back issues or something. That's rad.
Yeah, probably. It's an old series. It's a little bit dated. Like it's very like Marvel, like pre-Max, like trying to be in. No, no, it was Max. I think it was Max. I think so. It's a little bit try hard and a little bit
Yeah,
crazy sometimes, but it's still like I don't know. It's still BKV. It reads well.
right, right.
Okay,
All right. What do you got for the people, Cody?
I'm going to talk about something that came out this year in singles and this year in trades. This was like really, really fun. This is called Empire X-Men. Um, these are basically tie-ins to Empire, but in the most like whatever way possible. It's almost like this. Okay, well, first of all, I'll tell you who made this. This is by like a gaggle of creators across the X-Men line. Everyone got to do like an issue together. So you have different writers and artists kind of like working on each and every issue. So talents include Jonathan Hickman, Teenie Howard, Benjamin Percy, Jerry Duggan, Leah Williams, Ed Brisson, Vida Ayala, Zeb Wells, Matteo Buffagni, Lucas Wernick, Andrea Bercardi, Jorge Molina, Nolan Woodard, and Rochelle Rosenberg. So it's basically anybody who's anybody working on Dawn of X books did an issue of Empire X-Men, and the result is this madhouse of like silliness and adventure. It's almost like Jonathan Hickman was like, "Oh, there's going to be an event this year where there's plant people. I got you, fam. I am going to do zombies." And these zombies are going to fight the plants. And we're going to do plants versus zombies versus mutants. And I'm going to just do it because it's going to be fun. It's literally like, it felt like Jonathan Hickman sticking the most playful middle finger up at Empire because it has no repercussions to the actual Empire. You can read this without reading the actual Empire. It doesn't matter. They literally tell you exactly what it's going to be.
Oh, is that the old ladies, the plant ladies?
Yes, it
What
is.
what's
Introduced in
what's
like
the name of that? What's the name of that group? They have like a name that's super clever too.
horticulture. And
Yeah.
it's like the horde, but horticulture mixed together. So funny. So they're basically these like old women botanists who are essentially like the Golden Girls. Like they're literally like almost analogs of the Golden Girls. And their whole thing is like using botany and plants to like have their own revolution. And when Krakoa decides to build like a civilization using like plant gateways and stuff, obviously it throws off their equilibrium, touches their attention, and they infiltrate Krakoa by organic means, which like threw all the X-Men off. Like of all people to infiltrate Krakoa this easily, it was this group of old female botanists that are just super sassy and are just hilarious. And they come back in this. They were in like a single issue of X-Men. It was like issue 3 or something early in Hickman's run.
Yeah.
And they come back in a big way here because guess what? The Katati, which are like the antagonists essentially of the Empire series, are made like plant made of organic matter. So obviously that would pique their interest as well. And then on top of that, you got the Scarlet Witch causing a mess in Genosha. She decides that, oh, now is the time I want like ultimate redemption for my sins in House of X. Now, like, or House of M rather. So she's like, I'm gonna resurrect a whole island of mutants. Sure, why not? No repercussions. I can do it. She does. It goes bad. There's zombies. Now we have old ladies, mutants, zombies, and plants all together on one island of Genosha. It's bonkers. It's like so fun. It's only like it's 4 issues. It's a quick read, but it's hysterical. You even get an appearance by Explodey Boy, whose power is to explode and then die. If that's familiar, it's maybe because you heard me talking about Worst X-Men Ever a couple weeks ago. So Bailey's in here, or at least a character who's basically supposed to be this universe's Bailey is in here. He has like a 5-page conversation with his zombie self about like if he had his first kiss and what life was like, just blowing the zombie version of him's mind. It's just like full of shenanigans. If you just like a good ass time with familiar characters like Ileana, aka Magic, you get Angel in here, Warren Worthington, you get Horticulture, and it's just like it's X-Men just unleashed, not worried about continuity. You don't have to know anything about Krakoa or what's going on, really. And it's just like, yeah, Jamie Madrox is in here. Monet is in here. A lot of like deep cuts show up. Just fighting zombies and sentient plant people. It's great. And the best thing about it is that it's all Empire tie-ins. But like I said, it concerns itself not at all with Empire. Like, you don't need it. And that's like the funniest way to do a crossover. Like, Jonathan Hickman was tweeting that he was really excited, or he said in an interview he was really excited about Empire. And when you read this, it's hilarious that he said that, because why he was excited was because he was just going to say, fuck it, Plants vs. Zombies. And that cracks me up.
That's great. That's really cool. It feels like a more relevant next wave or something, just like completely bonkers, but actually fits into a story that's going on.
Yeah.
I want to check that out. I read the first issue of it and I found it highly amusing.
Oh, it's such a party. It's really funny.
Yeah. Uh, nice. Very, very good. I have, you guys know I like to talk about those sets of books, the big chunks. Because I feel like when I give you one book, you guys just eat it up real quick and then you want another one. So I'm trying to give you what you want. All right, so my next one has been one of my favorites for a long time. I buy it in trades, not in singles, because I came into it a little late. But it's still going. And I want it to end because I want to find out what's going on. But this is probably the best type of historical fiction fantasy writing ever. This book is called Manifest Destiny. It's by Chris Dignas and Matthew Roberts, which also I don't even really know of many other books that these guys do, which is fine with me. As long as they keep putting out Manifest Destiny, they will forever be my friends. But this story is essentially about the Lewis and Clark expedition as commissioned by the president of the U.S. at the time. And the task that they set out on that we all know about to explore the U.S. westward was a cover. They are supposed to be covering the exploration of the U.S. westward, but they're also supposed to be cataloging any monsters or creatures that they encounter and destroying them or dealing with them in order to make way for the colonization of America. So it's a boat full of criminals and people no one would miss, and Lewis and Clark. They're heading to go meet Sacagawea, who is married to a French fur trader, and they do not make her a demure little Indian woman at all. She is a savage, I shouldn't say savage, that's bad connotation. She's a badass warrior with a giant spear who helps out these explorers more than once. So I'm going to show you some cool stuff. They set out on their mission and they very quickly encounter this ark. I will figure this out one day. This giant ark. And throughout the books, they continue to encounter these giant arcs in areas where civilization is not supposed to exist. And it always happens that when they encounter an ark, a crazy creature or some really life or death scenario is hot on its heels. So when they encounter this ark and they get off the boat to explore a bit, they run into the first of the crazy mythical creatures who comes jamming at them out of nowhere, hits them with a stone tomahawk. Look at that furry hand. The character that they encounter, they take him down, and then it is basically a buffalo minotaur. Like, how fucking cool is that?
Whoa.
It's so stinking cool. And there's a lot of like politics at play, like these crew members. Like I said, a lot of them are criminals who have been offered a chance at redemption by joining this expedition. The powers that be knowing full well these men likely won't be coming back. And then as they explore, and it continues through 6 or 7 volumes of this amazing story, they encounter, other explorers that had been forgotten about that were on the mission before them. There's a sort of an insidious power at play that is guiding them to the West Coast through these trials and tribulations that it seems kind of shadowy and you don't know what's going on. Those are the answers I want when this book ends. I am hoping that it just keeps coming out consistently as clockwork, like it has been for, I don't know, 5-10 years.
Wow.
And I know it's such a long running series to have only 7 books, but it's like been so worth the wait. I would highly recommend checking it out. They deal with buffalo minotaur men, zombie plant people, giant 3-tongued toad that keeps killing people and eating their boats when they get off. There's like tiny bird people that speak human language. I mean, there's so many. It's so cool, so much fun. Please read it.
That's awesome. So that's like a historical fiction, fantasy, horror amalgamation of a comic.
Yeah, it's like a mashup of genres you didn't know would fit together that fit together so well. You kind of wonder why the hell there aren't more books like this. The only other book that I can think of that's similar in nature also came out around the same time, so maybe there was a little of inspiration taken from each other. But Manhattan Projects is another similar book where the A-bomb project was a cover for the government organization exploring, time travel and a bunch of other things that we don't know about because it was really only a cover.
Jonathan Hickman there, right?
And that's Jonathan Hickman. That's your guy. So we'll definitely bring that up, I'm sure, at some point. Like I said, you guys know I love these giant collected or multi-volume stories that are going. And Manhattan Projects is done, so that would be a good one for me to bring up next time. Check it out. We've got I think the first 5 volumes, then volume 7 for those of you who have been reading it and didn't know there were new ones out. I think it might even be up to 8 volumes at this point. I'd have to double check that, but check out volume 1. It's only I believe a $10 volume, $17 volume, but well worth the price of admission. The art is gorgeous. I don't, like I said, I wish that these guys were doing more stuff because I would read it and consume it wholeheartedly immediately.
That's awesome. I love fucked up looking creatures.
Oh my God, Cody, you would love fucking zombie plant creatures. They pull the boat up on shore and they look up on this cliff and they see this silhouette of a woman and they're all talking about how hot she is because they've been stuck in the boat for super long. And then she just falls off of the cliff and they're all freaked out and they run to go find her and they find this pile of mulch and plant life in the shape of a female body laying on the ground directly under the cliff. Come on, Cody.
That's really funny.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. All right, cool. So that's Manifest Destiny. You heard it here first.
Awesome. All right, my next book. So this is a book that I just read. This collection just came out, I think just last week, if I'm not mistaken. This is a book called Alienated. This was Cy Spurrier's book with art by Chris Wildgoose. Cy Spurrier right now is, I think, wrapping up his Hellblazer run. For people who might have seen his name around, he's done some X-Men stuff. He did that Legion series. He's done a bunch of stuff. He's done some X-Force too. Of course, I know the mutant stuff.
He did that Coda book that we talked about 2 episodes ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris Wildgoose, I actually wasn't familiar with. Have you read anything by Chris Wildgoose?
No. I mean, just that name, I want to.
I know it is a great name. I mean, the art is just fabulous. Show you guys a sneak peek while I chat about it. So this is a book that I would always see on the stands. And I was very, very intrigued by the synopsis and by that art. And I never got to it. I waited too long and then I was like, you know what? The trade's coming. It was one of those situations. I was like, the trade's coming out like next month. I'll just pick that up. But this is a book that really, actually, I read this past weekend and it actually brought me to tears a couple times. I don't know if I was just feeling particularly emotional, but it does deal with really heavy stuff. This book, I'm going to get into a little bit, and I do want to say that there's some trigger warnings involved in this book. It deals with various traumas and pretty serious situations, including things like self-harm. But it basically stars these 3 teenagers. They're all named Sam. We have Samantha, we have Samuel, and we have Samir. And it's basically, the premise is 3 Sams walk into the woods and find an alien that seems to be like being born in the middle of the woods. Upon making contact with this alien, they're gifted with the power of telepathy. They can suddenly read each other's minds, and eventually you find out that they also tap into the psyches of people in the town. These three teenagers are so realistic and so relatable. They're teenagers that are dealing with, your average teen angst, but on top of that, some really deep rooted issues and traumas that they haven't really processed, or at least not processed in a productive way. And so they get this amazing ability to be able to connect with each other, and they discover that they're all very alienated in very different ways. Our main character, Samuel, is a kid who has a lot of big ideas about revolution. It's very inspired by movements like Anonymous. He actually films videos all the time telling you to like take a stand, the power is with the youth, and be an individual, don't be part of the system. And the irony here is that he's obsessed with mimicking his hero, who's like doing a very similar thing as him, but on Anonymous's scale. So this guy is really famous for doing pranks on, for the sake of the disenfranchised, for the sake of the youth. And the irony here is that he's striving to be an individual, not part of a system, but he's so obsessed with being just like his hero that he like loses sight of what individuality means. And he gets very, very self-absorbed. And that's a lot of his trauma that he's dealing with. And it's all elevated by the abilities that he's granted. Samantha here is dealing with something pretty big. She had a pregnancy that wasn't planned, and she hasn't processed through that at all. She had to give up her baby because she wasn't ready to raise it. And so that's kind of what she has to confront. And Samir, his father left his family, and he was never given answers. He didn't know if it was because he was not, a proper Muslim in his dad's eyes, or he thought maybe it's because he's gay. He thought it could be any amount of reasons, but the point is he never settled that with his father. And basically all of these three are basically very headstrong. They're kind of like F you to the system, to society. They're very like kind of rebellious in their own right. They don't like the tryhards, the people that are very popular, the people who garner a lot of success. And basically with these newfound powers, they're basically almost vigilantes. They're like, well, we can tap into the psyches of people and make them suffer and make them pay for their, what these three see as their crimes. But the part that really is fascinating about this book is that that's not the issue here. The issue isn't the other people and their anger towards them. It's a lot of deep-seated anger that they have inside themselves about things in their own life. And that's what really got to me, because it's heavy stuff. It's relatable stuff. The way I pitch it is a very human story dealing with very alien abilities. And they set out to kind of conquer society's ills, and they end up confronting themselves. And it's just so poignant. It's beautifully written. Cy Spurrier writes a story that is both hilarious, but relentlessly poignant, always relatable. And the art is just this swirling, beautiful, like there's even some old school comic pop art thrown in there with some dot art that is used. Truly fantastic stuff. I'll show you some of how sweeping and swirling it can be. Actually, I have an even better page.
This sounds great. I want to read it. Is it fully done, or is there more to come?
Oh yeah. Thank you. This is a one and done book, so you can pick this up and go read it start to finish.
Awesome.
And this is another one I'm actually kind of glad I read in trade, because I probably would have been just aching for the next installment every single time.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chris Wildgoose is just doing some truly wild stuff in this book. That's full incredible. Of stuff like that. It's beautiful. It's such a good looking book. And like I said, Cy Spurrier manages to be very heavy, very poignant, but always entertaining. It's funny. I love it when they first get their powers, because it just does like kind of a split screen thing. Oh, got a holler at the colorist too.
Oh yeah.
Andre May, and the letterer too, because one of the things that happens is their narration is color coded. There's like a blue captions, green captions, and red captions. And you always know who's narrating because those colors follow them everywhere. And like their energies are split by these colors. And I love this book. It's truly, I did not know what I was getting into when I read it, but I'm so glad I did.
That's awesome. I love me some Cy Spurrier. I mean, he's done a couple that were so over the last like couple years, but he always comes through with something that just blows me away.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out, Mike Rowe, I think you said this back when I was saying that they gain the power of uh, connecting through their minds, and you said, and yet fail miserably at connecting. That's exactly nail on the head there. They can read each other's minds. They're always sharing that kind of mental space, but they have such a difficulty getting on the same page. They're making rash decisions. They don't know how to handle. And it's worth mentioning too that this alien who gave them their abilities, they keep it. They keep it like a pet. And they're keeping this massively powerful thing that they don't understand and just kind of feeding it and playing games with it and just using its power. And it's heartbreaking though, because this alien is like, it's only here temporarily. It was never meant to stay on Earth. And the way they're using it hurts this alien. So a lot of their wrath, a lot of their anger is actively causing physical pain to this poor alien creature. And you're seeing this like kind of innocence that they completely corrupted with their own vendettas. And
Wow.
I mean, so much of this book is just like, quite frankly, heartbreaking. Like I said, I cried a couple times. So
Yeah.
it's heavy stuff, but it's beautiful. It really is.
Awesome. Add that to my list, please.
It's so good. Highly recommend. Like I said, it comes with those trigger warnings, so keep that in mind.
You've been warned.
Yeah, but such a rewarding experience, truly.
That's awesome. Okay. And we do have that in stock. So if you're interested in a little bit of crying, a little bit of catharsis, get on it. All right. I've got one that's got a little bit of crying and catharsis in it. So you may know this creator from such glorious books as I Hate Fairyland, Rocket Raccoon and Groot, other such books. But Scotty Young took on the role of writer for this book with Image last year. And I don't know if he's ever done anything where he was just the writer before. I'd have to dig into that, but he is an awesome writer. Like even without the Scotty Young visuals, which I feel like people kind of expect when it's a Scotty Young book, gorgeous. He had George Corona or Jorge Corona doing the art on this. It's a book called Middle West. I mean, that cover is the same art as what's on the inside. The story is about this young boy, I think his name's Abel, who has a pet talking fox and a rather angry and abusive father figure. They live in a trailer park, and life's not great. He tries to be a happy boy, but his father has some real severe anger problems. You do get a sense real early on that this relationship between Abel and his father is informed by some personal stuff in Scotty Young's life. I don't know what he was going through, but you can almost feel the catharsis as you're reading the book. So Abel, tired of his dad's BS, decides to take off without telling his pops. So he sets off, essentially like a hobo with a sack and a stick to wander the train tracks, and he meets up with a circus where some of the people there know his father, and adventures abound. They're also kind of heartbreaking adventures he's constantly taken advantage of as a young man in this world, looked at as a child. There is an odd thing though. He has this thing that happens to him when he gets angry, just like his father, where the storm inside manifests as a storm on the outside. So when Abel and his father get angry, and they sink into that feeling, it creates essentially what you saw on the cover here, this big storm monster. So he's dealing with internal problems, external problems. His father's trying to find him after he leaves home. He joins the circus that I was mentioning. It doesn't go very well there. There's all sorts of fantastical creatures. You've got like bridge trolls, and like I said, his best bud is a talking fox. And you could imagine in a world like this, there are forces out there that are looking to obtain and take advantage of the children of the world. So he gets wrapped up in something like that. And I won't say much more because I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, this book it felt like a storm when I was reading it. There's a lot going on. I read it in singles and I loved it. I think it would read fantastically as a trade. There's 3 volumes to this. Book 1, book 2. Oh, he at one point even meets one of his other family members, one of the other males in his family, um, who also has a similar sort of power. This is volume 3. You can see stuff just builds throughout the story. They also made a really cool. I like super little minor design choices. I know you do too, Cody. So check out the back of volume 1. It's got this. This is essentially the shape of a scar that lights up and is growing on Abel as he fails to handle his aggression and anger, much like his father. Book 2, you can see on the back here, it's taking root and becoming larger. And then by volume 3, how is Abel going to handle the storm within? So like I said, it feels very informed by some stuff that was going on or had happened in Scotty Young's life, and I'm here for it. It was heartbreaking. It was great. I cried a little bit at the end, but it was an awesome ending. So it's complete now. I think that it's 3 volumes. Maybe there's a 4th one that's coming. I don't know, but check it out. I'm sure they'll do an omnibus at some point too, but I don't know if it's worth waiting for. You should read it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I didn't actually know much about that book. I knew that it was pretty successful.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who like it, read it, but that sounds like another like emotional roller coaster of a book. The way you're explaining it, like dealing with like anger and especially like kind of a hereditary kind of anger, working out things in his life.
Relatable, right?
Literally, like his anger manifesting itself and like the danger that's doing. That's awesome. I had a question about that book though. Is that like so is that kind of take place in a world all its own? Like did Scotty Young kind of build that world, or is it like fish out of water, like into a fantasy kind of situation? Or
no, the world is a fantasy world.
Okay.
So he built it for the purposes of the story. You'll notice that throughout all of the interactions that they have and the places he goes, that there's these giant pink vats of stuff that fuel the vehicles and the buildings.
Yeah.
And the machinery and the creatures are so mythical and wild that I'm pretty sure that it was just a world build. He definitely didn't come from somewhere into this world of talking foxes and creatures.
Yeah.
Check this out. I just stumbled across this page. This is Abel getting real pissed off. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
So I would imagine too that when they were doing this book, it had to be hard for someone like Scotty Young to pick an artist to work with him, knowing the chops that he has and the type of stories that he likes to craft. But I think that he picked the right guy. I don't think he could have picked anyone to do this better. Mr. Corona just fucking knocks it out of the park. I was drooling over his Instagram posts when he was teasing this book before it came out. I was like, who the hell is this George Corona dude?
Yeah.
Pleasantly surprised.
It is really good looking for sure. But yeah, I asked that because did you ever read Joe the Barbarian, Grant Morrison's book?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, I always, I don't know why, but I always got that vibe from it. But in that book, it's very much like, you know, his blood sugar, and he starts kind of, it's almost like hallucinatory. So I was wondering, but yeah, Middle West sounds like a total like world building situation, which is really cool too.
Yeah, I mean, it might be allegorical in some sense, but I don't get the vibe that it's talking about something that's like a clear picture. I mean, it just sort of has the themes and motifs that you'd get from a story that's happening in the real world.
Right. That's cool though. I love good world building. Yeah. That's awesome.
And I don't feel like that hereditary issue that you brought up, that's a great word. I hadn't actually applied that to this in my brain, but the hereditary anger and problems that people deal with, I honestly don't feel like there's very many comics that deal with that stuff. So it was kind of nice and very, I keep using the word cathartic, but we're picking a lot of comics that are ending in a feeling of just like washing yourself emotionally and coming out of it changed. So I don't mean to oversell the book, but it's going to change your life.
No, totally. I mean, that sounds like a good companion piece to Alienated because, like, I mean,
Yeah,
Alienated for me was like, who hasn't felt disenfranchised or screwed over by popular society, and
sure.
what we accept and celebrate. Like, who hasn't felt like they aren't accepted or celebrated? So, and
Right.
that leads to a lot of internalized anger, which is a theme in Alienated as well. So, look at these two companion pieces we chose this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Your boy Kevbot Mutant Menace. Didn't even realize that we were picking similar books. We're just that in tune.
Just casually choosing gut punches of comics for you guys,
No big deal.
You need them though. You need them to separate that super. I love superhero books, but you need these stories that are like much more like human and not tied to continuity. So refreshing.
Agreed. I mean, it's a lot easier to share them with friends and family too, because like, what are
Yeah,
you going to do? Talk about the last 50 years of Batman when you're trying to pitch a Batman story to your family, or
yeah,
these books that are just like a contained, theme and character group and stuff they can just dive right into.
yeah. Totally. These are the kind of comics where you can ask somebody what kind of movies they like and be able to hand them things based off of that.
Yeah, excellent. So we're at 55 minutes, so I think we could probably both get one in. I think, or maybe we'll just try
Probably.
one more. What do you
Yeah.
got?
My last choice for the day was, and last but not least, I should say, this is a Black Widow run, actually, that went shamefully under the radar. Gosh, this came out before Jodie Hauser's run, and after she came back to life in the pages of Tales of Suspense. This is sandwiched right in the middle, and not a lot of people talked about this. This is a Black Widow run written by the Shoshka sisters, who you might not be familiar with the Shoshka sisters. They're actually twins that make like B-grade horror slasher movies. They're into like gore porn, and they're into like a lot of like gnarly horror. So when I heard that they were writing a Black Widow run, my interest was absolutely piqued. Um, this is a book about Natasha just unleashed. She's dealing with a lot of frustration after dying, which is a very superhero problem. But she comes back to life, and she's kind of just really she's had it. She's had it with having mercy on the bad guys. Captain America is trying to tame her, and she's just not having it. And she basically decides, okay, I'm going to go to a place where the law is not respected, and I can kind of be the law. So she heads straight to Madripoor. For Marvel fans, know that Madripoor is a place that Wolverine frequents too. It's just full of all kinds of crime, drug deals, all kinds of crazy stuff happens in Madripoor. It's kind of a lawless land. It's also like kind of a neutral land. Like villains go there a lot just for like kind of sanctuary. So Black Widow's just like, I'm going to go to Madripoor and I'm going to clean up. She ends up chasing essentially a human trafficking ring. It's called No Restraints Play. And what this organization does is they go live, they do live videos of torture, and they peddle in like human trafficking. They abduct children, just the lowest of the low. And Black Widow says, nope, not anymore. I'm taking down this entire operation. And boy, does she. She heads in there with guns blazing, fists flying. The art is by Flaviano. Flaviano is so good. We need to talk about Flaviano because he's did some New Mutant stuff. He did the crazy. Here, I'll show you some of his stuff. Very detailed.
Yeah, that name sounds super familiar.
Oh yeah, they are just great. Here, I'll show you some stuff. Trying to go fast. I know we're almost out of time.
That's okay. It's okay if we go a minute or two over. Looks like a good book.
Oh yeah. At one point, she basically is going up against this organization called No Restraints Play. They actually abduct her. But little do they know that they're dealing with a Black Widow who's completely had it. And she just decides to go apeshit and set the place ablaze.
Wow. That's an awesome
kick.
2-page spread.
And just kick every type of ass.
Wow.
If anyone's a Black Widow fan that just wants to see her kind of at her best, fighting dudes that are literally the worst kind of criminals around, people who are affecting the lives of innocent children. Natasha just goes ham. The Shoshka sisters do gory horror movies, and they don't hold back here either. This is one of the more dangerous books that I think Marvel has put out recently, and it wasn't talked about a lot. And that's sad, because I really like when the big two can push boundaries and tackle some stuff that's kind of more intense than their standard superhero fare. And so good to see this strong woman defend the weak and defend the innocent in a way that Captain America won't be crying about and frowning at her for, because he's not around. We're in Madripoor, baby, and Black Widow is out here doing her thing. So badass. The art's amazing. There's also genuine twists by the end of this. There's several double crosses that happen. So there's also a lot of intrigue packs in here. It's not just fighting. There's a lot of twists and turns. So I highly recommend this Black Widow run. Totally overlooked.
And what's it called for those that want to find it online? Is it got a sub name to it, or is it just Black Widow?
Yeah, for sure. It's Black Widow No Restraints Play. So it's named after that horrible operation that she goes to take down. It's 5 issues. You don't need to know anything going into it other than Black Widow's back, and she doesn't want to be held back by the Avengers anymore. So she leaves.
Yeah. That sounds cool. Sounds like a different sort of catharsis, just a much bloodier one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like this is the anger that we're just deciding to embrace. we're not gonna confront this anger. We're just gonna go with it.
That's awesome. Well, I have a couple more, but I'm gonna save them for next week. Since we've hit our time, unless you want to squeeze one more in. I think we're good, right?
Yeah, we hit an hour.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our book club, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We had a blast. I hope you did too. If you have any questions about the books we talked about or related things, just holler at us at the store. You can hit us up via Instagram, email, call the shop during the open hours, which are scrolling down below.
Scrolling constantly. Here, one more thing. Of Flaviano's detail.
Whoa.
It's just so good. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Thank you so much for everyone who watched. Thanks for everyone who participated in the chat. Make sure you to subscribe on YouTube if you like this. Hit the bell for notifications. All these things help us a whole bunch with the weird algorithms. We want to get in front of as many people as we can and talk about comics, because comics are kind of the best.
And we promise we'll give a more substantial warning that we're going to do this on Thursday next week. We didn't really advertise it today, but it was a busy week.
It was. Thank you, everyone who participated in our birthday sale. All right.
Thanks,
With
guys.
that,